Okay, so today we're going to start the topic of Nida. Now there's a lot of confusion about what Nida is because things changed over the generations. So I first want to go over what the Torah says, then we'll understand what Yisrael added, and then we'll understand what the Chachamim added. Okay, so there's the first thing Hashem says in Parshas Mitzorah, that a woman who sees in her normal time, so it doesn't make a difference how long she sees, the very fact that she sees, she's tamei for 8 days. Sorry, 7 days. 7 days. Okay? Which means it's not about dam flowing, it's about a certain period of her space that in that time of period she has an inability to become tahar. And in order for that tahara to happen, there needs to be a 7-day process. It doesn't make a difference if she's clean or not. After that 7 days, at the nighttime of the 8th day, she'd be able to go to the mikveh. Okay, so, and every concept of tumah we know in the Torah always runs around the topic of death, right? It says that the shorish of every tumah in the world is Adam Harishon Chet, that he made death in the world, and an expression of that death is the fact that there was this ability to have. Can anybody hear me? Hello? It says my microphone is not working. Okay, I'm switching devices. That's why I had to switch devices in the middle because my microphone stopped working. Everybody hear me now? Okay. Okay. So 7 days a woman is tamei after she sees dam, and the point of this tumah has to do with the process of once a month of the body spilling everything out, which means that the fact that she is getting rid of everything at that process is the reason why the tumah happens. What would that not include? For example, let's say she saw dam in the time of the month where she's not supposed to see dam. Right, it's not part of her cycle. So then that would not cause any sort of tumah. It's not the point in the Torah's version of Nida. It's not the point that she saw dam. It's the point that she got to that space of the month, which is time for the body to let everything out, and that status is what makes the 7-day tumah.
Wait, it's not connected to death at all? Like,
I don't know.
Okay.
What I mean to say is, once a month, a woman goes through a process where the egg is let out, right? Which is some sort of miniature version of death, right? That makes tumah. But it's not because she saw dam. If she would see dam in a different time of the month, it wouldn't make her tamei. It's because that time of the month is a cycle of everything get let out, right? So that process of letting everything out, which is a me'ain of death, that makes a woman tamei. And she's tamei, even if she saw dam for 2 minutes, she's tamei for 7 days because that's the beginning of the process. Okay, so now, and it's also clear in the Gemara and in the Poskim that at least it was true for women. And I would suggest that maybe everyone should think about this if they have this, is that they knew from experience inside their body that this process was happening. Right? The Chazal called this the hargasha. And I always like to ask women, I said, if not in the concept of the topic of halacha, because people get halacha, they get all nervous, but is there, when you have your period, do you know that it's happening? What makes you, oh yeah, I got it, right? Whatever that sign is, that has extreme ramifications in halacha. That sign, if a woman has that, we assume she's nida even if we don't know she has dam.
Would this include like premenstrual symptoms where you know that it's going to happen imminently?
No, premenstrual symptoms just mean that it's a sign that it's going to happen, right? It doesn't mean it started already, right? And that's relevant only to being careful not to be together because it might cause it to come earlier. We're not talking about that topic. We're talking about where the moment is, okay, yeah, it came. So a lot of women say they don't feel that nowadays, right? Which makes things in halacha kind of complicated, and I'll explain that soon. But I would encourage every woman to notice if there is something that they can be more conscious of. I think it's a problem that nowadays people are not conscious of their body. But or they're not eating healthy, I don't know which, but whatever it is, it's very clear that it wasn't such a long ago that women did notice, and this is the sign that the process has started. In other words, theoretically speaking, if a woman saw blood and she didn't feel that feeling, and then she felt it a day later, that would mean that the Nida process started a day later. It didn't start then. And it's also true.
Wait, say that again? You're saying if she saw blood but didn't feel the Hargasha, then it didn't start?
Right. Now I'm talking about.
Now?
It does theoretically, because there is a topic which we're going to learn about, is dam that is not included in the menstrual cycle, right? For example, let's say a woman sees dam, 15 days later she sees dam out of nowhere, okay? So that's really strange, right? So that is called a ketem. Why is it called a ketem? Because conceptually speaking, the way she knows about it is she finds it on as a dirty thing on her clothing, because she didn't know it happens. By the definition, there's two topics basically in halacha. One halacha is, oh yes, my cycle started. How do I know? Because I feel it. Oh, I found something that's dam. Wait, obviously my cycle didn't start. It's just I found it. That's how the simple halacha is presented. The complication of nowadays, of course, is that women can have their cycle started and they say, I didn't even know. And they only found it, right? And it's really their cycle. So it becomes complicated more for us to figure out if the cycle started and the cycle started. So first we're going to talk about conceptually, and then we're going to talk about practicality. Conceptually speaking, to understand what Nida is, it's the process of where the body says, okay, I started my process now, kicking out all the dam. And dam that comes out before that process is just like a nosebleed. It doesn't have anything to do with tumah. Okay, that's what it is min Torah. Okay, now Chachamim, because that's a very difficult thing for people to deal with. So they said that even a woman who sees a ketem, which means she has no idea what the hargasha is, if she finds it and her begadim, we're going to say she's tamei, because people will get mixed up. And they'll think, oh, finding dam is not a problem. But because it's different, it's not what the Torah said, they made all kinds of dispensations that the second that it wouldn't be confused between dam nida and not dam nida. And we'll go through all the details, but the klal is if they can get away with not making it asar, they do that. Right? So we're going to find all kinds of ideas in Chazal, which it's clear it's like not, you can't really make it, it's inherently difference between tamei and tahar. Really, they're all tahar, but every time we're trying to keep lack of confusion, we make a system where if you have this case, which is completely confusing, we make that asur. Otherwise, if it's not completely confusing, we make it mutter. Okay? So we'll go through all the details of that, but I wanted to get you the concept of what the difference between dam min Torah is and dam min Chachamim. Dam min Torah is the process of kicking out dam. Usually, in classically, it starts with a feeling, and the woman knows that okay, my cycle started, and the dam d'Rabbanan is classically found on the clothing because she didn't know what happened, and pitov, I have dam, okay, and that has all kinds of kulas to it that we're going to learn about. Is there any questions on this so far?
I just want to clarify that you're saying that according to the Torah, the process of nida started by the hargasha of the period cycle, and anything other than that is not necessarily tameh, but the chachamim made anything that was complicated tameh for the sake that we don't really know, but possibly a lot of these things are actually mutter.
No, it's
No,
not
it's not that they're actually mutter, they are mutter. Minat Torah, it's like a nosebleed. And the Chacham said, if we let that be, then what's going to happen is people are going to stop keeping nida because they're not going to be able to differentiate between here's dam and here's dam. Right? So they said, we're going to make dam that she finds usher, unless we could look at it and say, nah, no one's going to get confused. Okay? As an example, just to throw it out, right? That if it's on colored clothing that's not completely white, we say, that's mutter. Why? Because colored clothing, you can't really tell the color. And I skipped a step which I wanted to explain, which is Minat Torah, not every dam is tameh. Right? It takes a tremendous amount of chachma to differentiate between dam tahor and dam tameh. And in the time of David HaMelech, he took cloths and he said, oh, this type of dam is mutter and this type of dam is asur. And it's so close that you have to have incredible chachma to be able to differentiate. It's like I know somebody who said that he works in rubies, so he can see 200 different shades of red. He can differentiate between the two of them. So we're talking about a chachma that people can differentiate the type of shades. Minat Torah, that's what Hashem gave us the chachma, that it could be the woman can bleed for 3 days and her cycle didn't start. Because that dam is not dam tameh. Right? And it could be she could bleed for 1 day and her cycle did start. So it's extremely confusing. And until the time of basically the Tanoim, which is the people who wrote the Mishnayos, people were able to differentiate between dam, but it was only a very, very special chacham who really knew how to do it. Nowadays, no one knows how to do it. Okay? So one thing we started is that any type of red, any dam red, as far as we're concerned, we have to worry that it's nida. But since it takes chachma, so if you have a cloth which a woman finds, and she finds blood on it, and it's not white. So over there we say, you know what? That's not a problem to make mutter. Why? Because you can't. Maybe a person can just say, nah, it's not the right color. So any excuse that they had to be able to make this dam out, they did. Because inherently it's not dam nida. It's just the process of the woman having dam. Who cares if she has dam? This menstrual cycle is the problem, not dam is the problem. And the menstrual cycle only happens for 7 days, right? And then it's finished. Okay, is that clear?
Yeah, but can I just put in a practical, practically postpartum bleeding is not egg dropping at all, so why is any of that even considered? I mean, I know we'll go further more into it, but that's just one situation that I could understand that is almost 100% not a cycle in the body that we are still applying nida for.
Okay, so Hashem says that when a woman has a baby, the fact that there's a vacuum of life in her, right? She used to have all this life in her, and now she doesn't have it. That makes her tameh for 7 days for a boy and 14 days for a woman. Okay? Then, min haTorah, she has 33 days for a boy and 66 days for a girl, that all the dam that comes out is tahar. Like you're saying, it's not a cycle.
Can you say those numbers again?
It's
7 days for a boy, 14 days for a woman, for a girl, which is that she's tameh, not because she has a cycle, because she has a birth. And the fact that the birth, now her body is empty from life, that itself causes tumah. She goes to the mikvah, and of course after labor, women see blood for a long time, right? So by a boy, if she sees blood for 33 days, she's totally tahor. It's not dam nida, it's not dam tahor. It's like a nosebleed, right? And the same thing for a woman, for a girl, but over there it's, if my memory serves, it's 66 days. Right? I can look on the Chumash for a second.
Can you explain why the number of days changes based on the gender of the baby?
Can I guess? I don't have a concrete source. I would say that a woman has more source of life in her, so there's more life that was left the mother, and therefore there's more tuma. That's what I would suggest. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I was right. It's for a woman, for a girl, it's 14 days, and the Dam Torah is 66 days. Okay. So now that's how it was before Klal Yisrael started to change things. Okay. In order to understand what Klal Yisrael changed, you have to know another halacha in the Torah, which is that a woman is supposed to bleed in a healthy situation not more than 7 days. Okay? When she's bleeding already after the 7th day, Hashem says that it's a different category of blood. It's called zava. Right? And basically it's termed in the Torah as a sickness of tumah. Okay? It's not a healthy situation. And therefore now what has to happen is something called nikiyin. In other words, now instead of just there's a normal process which has a certain amount of time and then it's finished. Now we need to undo a messed up situation. So in order to fix a situation which is holy, she needs to have a day of tahara. If it's 1 day, and if it's 3 days, she needs 7 days of tahara. In order to reverse, to undo this process, she needs 7 days of cleanliness, which not only is it clean, but she's paying attention and what's called bedikos. She's checking to make sure that this is gone. So the process of checking herself is itself a changing the situation from tuma and tara. In other words, it's a change in the person. The fact that the person goes through this process, that is the tahara. It's like their own personal growth. So it has to do with being clean, and has to do with being the cognizance of being clean. Both of those things together brings her out of this unnatural state to a place of tahara. And it's such an unnatural state of tuma that there has to be a carbon. Part of her ability to become tahara is a carbon which is mechaper, right? It brings more tahara. Without that carbon, she can't go on the Beis Hamikdash. Okay? So that was a situation in the Torah that there were 7 days. No matter what, doesn't make a difference. You're clean, not clean. 7 days, it ends the 8th day, you're fine. After that, Hashem says if there's dam later than the 7 days, it's a simon of something wrong. It needs a special process. And when there's a 3-day bleeding period, then you need a special process called shiva nikiyim. She has 7 days where she does bedikas, and she pulls herself out of this situation. Okay? That is what the halachas of Hashem said. Now, when Gola started...
I didn't fully grasp that. If there's bleeding after the 7 days for 1 day versus 3 days, and this is just for a cycle, this is not for postpartum.
Right. This
is not postpartum. This is not after birth, because after birth is a totally different situation. This is a normal situation of month to month, right? So her cycle starts. When it goes after the 7 days, there's different rules. I don't want to go into all the details of the rules because it's just very complicated. The main rule that was relevant to us is when she has a 3-day period, that by definition makes her a zava gedola, it's called, and she needs to have 7 days of bedikos and cleanliness. And then afterwards, she can bring a carbon, and she's tar without the carbon, but the carbon allows her to go to the Beis Hamikdash. So what I'm pointing out is that there's a process that happens that is unnatural, and the tumah needs different types of refuah. It's not like you just have to finish it and get done with it. You have to actively do something and take it away. Okay? Now, about the time of in the middle of after the Tanoim, Klal Yisrael started a minhag that was the Chachamim were behind also. That there's a lot of confusion about where the woman was holding in her cycle. Partly because we don't really know where her cycle starts, because we don't know what dam is. So she could be bleeding for 6 days and her cycle starts a day later. And then it affects everything in the future. So they made an haga, which in my opinion is probably one of the biggest nisyonos of our dar, which is they said that in order for a woman to become tahar, she needs to go through the process of Shiva Nikim. That means that whenever her dam finishes, she needs to have the active process of tahara, of checking herself and having 7 days of cleanliness in order to pull her out of where she's holding, because we assume, or we're choishesh, we're worried that not only did she have the normal process of menstrual cycle of once a month, she had the sickness of zava that she needs to pull herself out of. Now it's obvious that it wouldn't be true for every case and every woman and every month, but since it is common and it will happen for some women sometimes, the Ingulas was too complicated for people to pay attention to all these things, and then they made it very simple. You see dam, you wait Shiva Nikim. You see dam for a second, you wait Shiva Nikim. And then the minhag kept going, and this is a later minhag, that they also decided to do the same thing for dam after birth. Because again, people couldn't figure it out. Like I'm talking to you. You never even heard of this concept of dam after birth being tar. So it was very difficult for people to pay attention to all these things. So they said one klal. You see dam, you wait Shiva Nikim. Which obviously adds quite a amount of time in the cycle, which becomes extremely frustrating for people. So I think it's important to I think it's important to realize that nothing happens in Klal Yisrael stam. Nothing happens, especially when the Gemara is very clear that women started this minhag. In other words, the women felt that was necessary, and I think it's true to say that the reason, in a deep way, why this has to happen is because of where the world's holding. It's not easy to pull yourself out of Nida, and we needed an active process, like there was by Zava, that we active process of the woman pulling herself out of Shiva Nikim. So even though it was mitlabesh, Chazal hid it within all of these type of chashot, all of these things which are true, but there are many situations in Chazal where they say something which is like, okay, but it sounds really strange, like, all right, we accept it because we're having Muna, but you would basically think to yourself, okay, come on. An example of that, let's say, is Yom Tov Sheni. Right? We have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, 2 days of Sukkot and Chutz La'aretz and Rosh Hashanah. And the reason the Gemara gives is like, okay, maybe one day that we'll lose the calendar, we'll go back to confusion. No. And it says clearly in the Arizal and other places, that was just the external reason why they said so. But the real reason why they said so is because Chutz La'aretz needs more days of Yom Tif in order, because it's harder for the Kedusha to get there. So they made an extra day Yom Tif in order to pull all of the Kedusha in. And Rosh Hashanah they wanted to change it because they wanted 2 days of Din to make the Din not as strong. So the Chachamim have all kinds of inner, when the person understands the inner world of things, they make all kinds of decisions that are different than what would be the assumed thing. And it comes out sounding a little strange. But it's clear that they had a reason, that they made things so difficult for people. They had a very, very important reason to do it that would cause only benefit to everybody and not harm. So basically, it comes out, if we're talking about practicality, there's basically 2 questions we have to ask ourselves all the time. Question number 1 is this dam part of the menstrual cycle? Because if it's not, then it has nothing to do with Nida, and then it's called a ketem, and we're going to have all kinds of dispensations given to make this tahar. Second question we have to know is, was there Shiva Nikim? Right? That's always going to have to ourselves. You saw dam, there needs to be 7 days of Nikim, which includes the pedikos, because Shiva Nikim, that pedikos is basically worthless, because it's not about not having dam. It's about her going through a process of pulling herself out of the tuma.
And the way to do that, Hashem says, is to pay attention. Very similar to what Sfiras HaOmer is, that you pay attention to each day, or else you don't really value each day, and you're not building the process towards Kabbalah Torah. So it's not just the fact that she's tahar. It's like, oh, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Ad Kedei Kach, there was a certain person who thought that it made sense that a woman should actually have to count. She has to say, this is the first day, the second day of Tahara. We don't do that, but there was somebody who was a very holy person who thought that it's important for the woman to count, to know where she's holding. And Ad Kedei Kach, that there's a halacha that if she loses track and she's not paying attention to herself, right? And she's really like, and that's it. I'm not planning to make myself clean. And then she ends up finding, oh, you know what? I'm going to go to the mikvah because she lost days in between, where she wasn't paying attention. That will mess up the Shiva Nikim. Okay. So what I'm just trying to bring out is Shiva Nikim is a process not about only dam. It's about the person herself. She's going through a process of tahara that is expressed in the fact that she's paying attention to her body, that it's clean, and she's doing bedikos as a full-blown knowledge of that process. Okay. Any questions until now?
Yeah, if a woman loses count, then she must start over or ask of.
Okay, so I don't know exactly what you mean by losing count. Explain the case.
No, I'm saying from what you were just saying before, if a woman loses count and just decides
it's more like this. She starts doing bedikos, and then she's like, you know what? I'm not going to the mikvah. Okay? She just decides she's not going to keep checking. All right? And then she decides 2 days later, you know what? I'm going to go to the mikvah. So then she does bedikos, right? She has the minimum bedikos. She has the first and the last, but in the middle, she wasn't aware. So maybe there was dam that come out and she didn't pay attention to it. So it's not about just the first bedika and the last bedika. It's about the whole process. That the first bedika solidifies that process, and the last bedika solidifies that process. But it's an entire cognizance, awareness of what's going on inside of me. That these 7 days, I'm totally clean. And when you start understanding this concept, it's not so hard to realize that within the world that is full of tumah, it makes sense that they can understand that a woman needed more to pull herself out of the tummy situation. Okay? Not that I'm saying that I know that for sure. I'm saying it makes sense to me that Chazal would do that. And it does say in the Shla that as the Dorot get more difficult, we need more Tahara. And that's why the Shiva Nikim. So my explanation of that is that a woman in a situation of Nida attracts more. There are more things that she has to deal with, and therefore it's harder to pull herself out of that process.
Okay.
Now I want to go into, before we go into the halachos of what it means to be a Nida, I think it's important to understand the pnimius of it. And Chazal are pretty clear about this, which is unusual. The Gemara Nida and Daf Lamed Aleph says in Tanya Hayar Rav Meir Omer. Rav Meir says, why should a woman be Nida for 7 days? That a person who's, it's after you get together, intimacy for so much time, it gets boring, it gets like something you don't want. That in order that there should be this magic of the chuppah every month within their cycle, so there's a process of where they're not together on a physically intimate way. And if I would explain this a little bit more, it's like Hashem, when He made us experiences, so He made us a full-blown experience, right? There's experiences in smell, touch, hearing, right? There's a lot of experiences in the world in order for us to connect us in many different ways. So a husband and a wife can have a very intimate connection, and that's a very huge part of the connection. But if it was only that, it would be quite limited, right? So because people gravitate to that power very easily, so Hashem said the smartest thing for you to do is have a period of time where you're not doing that at all, to develop other parts of your connection that to be more enriched, spending time together, having fun together, right? The part of intimacy that's not physical.
And that makes the experience more full-blown, more connective, more parts of life are activated. And whereas if you're focusing on intimacy, you wouldn't spend as much time and effort because you're experiencing your connection in full-blown in the physical sense. And I've seen it very clearly in the world that people who don't keep Nida, they get bored much more easily. So now, why is this important? Besides the fact that it's important to have meaning in everything we do, there's a deeper reason why it's important. Because what is the halachas of a Nida? So we know that the first problem that a Nida presents is if the couple is together and going in bris in makom, right? Even without any zera, whatever it is, the very fact that there's that type of connection, so it's extremely damaging to both of them. It's equally damaging to the man as it is to the woman, right? And the way I understand it is that a zivug is it's something that is a creation, no matter what you do, right? The fact they connected is already something else than it was before, and that connection happens is experiencing in a time with disconnect, where they actually can't connect because she's flushing out, right? So what happened was the death of that period is what's expressed in their zivug, right? The zivug becomes an expression of that death. So what happens is, like what the Torah says, it causes kares. And it also causes, before we get to the kares, the man has the same tumah of the woman as she does, and he has to wait 7 days in order for him to come to the Beis Hamikdash. In other words, it spreads, right? And unlike a woman, a woman is transient; she can flow through it, right? But when they're together at that point, it's like they stuck there. It's like they put that in reality. Like this is what's now we've put it into the world that has become our relationship for that experience, right? That's why it's something which is damaging. The same way every zivug you ever had never disappears, right? It's there forever. It's eternity, and just you're not in that period of time. But if you looked at all the reels together, you would see a totally different energy of that moment than you would see for the rest of the reels on the film, on the TikTok film, right? The same thing is true for Nida. If you would get together and the zivug would make that element expressed in their yichud, instead of it being a flowing process where the woman goes in and goes out and goes in and goes out, it becomes stuck. And then they're in that process, their life includes that death no matter what. And that's why it has a very serious ramification, ad kedei kach, that it's called kares. Now, therefore, the ikar problem of doing that is only accessing that place in the body and connecting that part of the body. So really, as far as that goes, there should be absolutely no problem having any physical contact besides having bris in makom. And that's true on a level of kares. Now Hashem, as the rest of the Torah is an eitzah, he gives us an eitzah. He says, "Lo tikru legalos erva." Not only shouldn't you actually have a relationship with an erva, and this includes all of the ervas, which is Ish or your brother and sister, or father and daughter, and Nida, all of these things, don't do things that will bring you to that process and then stop. In other words, we know that the sexuality is a whole process of build-up, and there's a lot of stages, right? And each one leads to the other, pulls to the other. You do one thing, now your body and your emotional process needs to go forward, and if you want to stop it, you have to put on serious brakes. So Hashem says, "Lo tikru legalos erva." Don't do something which will make one step forward energetically towards that process. Why? Obviously, because don't be stupid, right? Don't think that you're so strong that you can do anything in the world. And if you start that process, it's nuclear power, and you will end up, or you could very well end up, doing the most destructive thing you can possibly do with your life. So be smart and don't get into situations of sexual contact throughout the process of Nida. So which means we have two halachas that have to do with Nida. Number one is actually sleeping together, which does not have anything to do with zera, it has to do with going inside. The second thing is
avoiding that by not having sexual contact in Nida, and that is an Isser Torah. It's called a lav, which means it's not a process of destruction itself. It's a bad way of living. It's destructive to your midos, and you're basically, I would say that even if couples do this, right, and they're safe about it, long term, it's a very, very big nisayon. In other words, the first time you do it, the second time you do it, the third time you do it, the first month you do it, the third month you do it, the fourth month, the fifth month, it's already a really big problem. The people have to really, really withhold not to do it. And one of my very close Rabbeim, who is a Kaddish Vitar and a Mekubal, he told me that he fell in Nida because he wasn't careful with this thing. And he's like, the biggest people fell in Nida, don't be stupid. Okay? That was his nisbas. So that's what's Asr min HaTorah. Now, so that would mean hugging that is sensual. That would mean kissing. That would mean certain ways of talking. Right? There's talk, which is loving, which is I love you, I care about you, all kinds of things like that, and even like I really want to be with you. And there's talk which is descriptive more, which is part of the process of an intimate process where you're using words to build up also desire. And those type of words also, you wouldn't, that's Hashem saying, don't do those words in Nida, right? Don't do suggestive things during Nida. There's a certain playfulness that is matim for a couple that is, don't do it during Nida. And all of those things are included in the lav, the Isser L'Sikra V'Legalis Erva. I think my wife's going to go through it soon, but there's another topic called harchakos. That's a harchaka of the Torah. Chazal made it one step further, and they said that since a couple is extremely connected, and therefore they have a lot of memory, a lot of sensual experience, which has a lot of context. So we want to avoid more things than just sexual touch. Because again, it's a train ride. You start there, you go there, you go there, you go there. So they made more farther-reaching things, and you'll learn about them. I'm sure you learned about them before. For example, no touch, right? Min HaTorah, if you hug in a way that's just have a goodbye, or even if you're like two people cuddling in a bed that was like a brother and a sister, there's no problem. But obviously, if you start cuddling like that, especially on the man's side, it starts very quickly switching, and it's very hard to have that line. So they said no touching. And then the different halakhas that they added, that my wife will go through, and it's always good to notice the midos of it. But the reason I started with the tam of Nida is because all of this, you have to realize, is a way of the couple getting more connected. Right? They were separating in order to get more connected. Now what happens very classically on the man's side for sure, and especially if people are super OCD about halacha, there are many things that are done that actually destroy on a long-term level, or very much break on a long-term level, the yichud. And obviously if the whole point of Nida is to make a better zivug, and the halacha is supposed to be a way of guiding you to do that. Anytime you're going to do b'shem halacha, something which is going to do the opposite of that, you're obviously doing something wrong. Right? So I'll give you an example, right? Which is a lot of men mess up, even on something which looks very simple, right? So there's a hecker, right? You're going to learn about hecker. You put the hecker between two plates, right? So you can feel for yourself as women. There's certain times where you're holding in a certain situation, and he goes, here, this is between us, right? I don't want you. That's the message of this thing, right? So in certain situations where a woman's holding, that could be the most destructive thing you could possibly do. She may not recover from that for 2 months, right? Or what happens to a lot of men, let's say not so extreme, a lot of men, because they're scared of, it's hard for them to hold this middle ground, so it's very common for men to shut down completely. And it's like, now you're my sister. Now you're somebody. I love you, but there's no romantic context between the two of us, right? And they're saying, oh yeah, I just want to be super careful about Hilchos Nida, right? But obviously, that's the complete opposite of Hilchos Nida, right? If you're using the time to disconnect as opposed to have cheshek, then you're doing it wrong. Nida is supposed to be where even the wink and even the suggestive, just you can't wait to touch each other, and the fact there's a buzz there, that's what's supposed to be building. And if it's dead, right, and if there's no buildup, there's no excitement, there's no yearning, then you're doing something deeply wrong. And that's destructive. So it's very important to teach kallahs, and of course teach chasanim, that if that's what's happening in the zivug, then you're doing something wrong. And don't blame halacha, you're just not getting halacha. And therefore, I would say that halacha will never change, but I very much appreciated, as I got older, what Rav Ovadia said, and he said it in his halachic nusach, but as I got older, I understand what he was trying to do. He said halachakas are lichatchila. In other words, they're a lichatchila way of living. But if the extenuating circumstances, then you have to drop one, keeping in mind the point. In other words, since the point is harchaka, the point is not to sleep together, and the point is also to build up the yichud. So if something is doing the opposite, for sure on a short-term level, be smart and don't do that. Right. So for example, let's say it would be completely ridiculous in a situation. You have a baby and you can't put the baby down, and you don't want to hand the baby to, and it's going to cause a tremendous turmoil to give the baby to the woman. Don't make yourself crazy. Nothing's going to happen. Right? You're having the same harchaka. If life would be consistently where they're handing things to each other and they're retouching all the time, that would build up. But instead of letting circumstances, drop it in a second, because it's not like your Mechal Shabbos. Shabbos is not going to change if it's extenuating circumstances or not. It's Chil Shabbos, right? This is not Chil anything. This is a smart way of living. And it's only smart if it does both things. Keeps you away from Nida and makes building the relationship. If it's going to destroy one of those things, you're not keeping halachakas. You're doing something else. And therefore you have to be wise and smart how to use these halachas in the proper way. Any questions about that?
I have a question. So, like, in that vein, I'm thinking of like a woman who's postpartum and is really struggling and doesn't have support and, needs physical touch for her mental health. And there's no one there who's like helping her except her husband.
Right.
So where do you go with that?
Okay, good. So first of all, I'll tell you a piece of information which I heard from a woman working in the labor ward, a young woman, smart woman, and she said to me, and I can't verify this, but I think it's pretty wise. She says to me that she can tell 100% of the time the women are postpartum is because her husband's not involved. Okay, so absolutely clear that in that situation, and I'll tell you something else also, not only postpartum, what's extremely common nowadays is trauma. Okay? And as I heard from a therapist who works in trauma, he says women in trauma don't do Nida. Okay, most of them sleep together during Nida. Okay, so if we're going to be very holy and good, and we're going to avoid sleeping together during Nida, I would say as a Rav, halacha l'maisa, it's absolutely wrong to do many of the halakas for a couple who a woman is suffering in trauma. Absolutely wrong. There will be nothing positive. She'll end up cheating on him, something like that. Okay, because she needs that. The same thing is true in a situation of postpartum. We're talking about postpartum is a chole, sheyesh bo sakana, right? And physical touch in a chola sheyesh bo sakana, as long as it's not sexual touch, is very necessary. Another place that's extremely important to do that is during a labor, right? In the last part of a labor, a woman is called, in what's called transition, a woman is called chola sheyesh bo sakana, like a more mefureshus, and when you that if she says it's too dark for me, I want more light, you turn on the light on Shabbos. No games. That woman needs to be totally calm. So if a woman asks you to hold, if a woman says I want my husband to hold her hand in that period of time, yalla habibi, right? Hold her hand. Why? Because all of these things are not sexual touch. Right? And this is not going anywhere negative. It's a harchaka. In this situation, it's completely not matim to do that type of harchaka. What's matim is to make sure that the zivug doesn't get destroyed and the woman doesn't get destroyed. Okay? So
literally the first time I've heard this, and it's what I've always thought. So I'm very happy to hear you say this. Thank you.
Right. So some of this is mefurish and halacha. right? For example, the concept that I told you about of a chola, isha chola, right? That's clear in halacha that a woman who is in sakana, then you drop even touching. And of course, there's a discussion. What there's a discussion about in the poskim, if anybody ever asks you, is something called mishush hadofek, right? A woman they need to check her heart, right? There's a whole discussion in the poskim if that's okay. And Ashkenazim are totally makel. And the reason for that is because obviously there's certain sensual touch between the husband and the wife that's right away, right? So even if they're both in a situation of like tachlis, but the reason why she's going to feel good is because of his sensual touch, and that the Shulchan Aruch says that's a situation in which you should avoid doing. You should find someone else to do it. But I don't think it has anything to do with the woman in labor, because holding hands is not that at all. Right? I think they're specifically talking about something which is more inside the body, and it's more sensual touch, which has context between the couple. But that is very clear. The chola sheyesh bo sakana. There's no games. You do what you need to do. The only thing you don't do is sexual touch. That's clear halacha in the Shulchan Aruch. Okay. The application to a woman who is postpartum, a woman who is in trauma, that is not before Shulchan Aruch, because you need seichel. Right? And Shulchan Aruch is not a book of seichel. You're supposed to have seichel without Shulchan Aruch. Right? So to understand the situation of postpartum, what you need to do is look long term. Right? In this minute, she's not going to die, but you're trying to avoid a long-term process, and trauma is the same thing. It's very cute that right now she's not going to die, but this marriage will not last. Right? So it can't be that the halachas of Nida are destroying the zivug. Okay? Now that topic of dropping halachas in the Rabbanan halachos that are going to mess up the zivug, you will not find in Shulchan Aruch, right? That's why I quoted Rav Ovadia, because Rav Ovadia took that on his shoulders, and I think it's once I explain the pneumius of Nida, it's quite obvious, right? That it has to be that way, and therefore you're going to find a lot of people, especially in this generation, who have a very hate relationship with halacha, and very difficult time during Nida, and they have already a lot of sexual context in their life, and it's a big deal for them to be machmir, to tell them all the harchakas or yahar val yavar that they must do them, is a good way, especially for the husband, to doing very negative things. All right, so it's important to teach them this is the right way. In other words, this is the smartest way to live during Nida, assuming you do it right. And if you find it causing damage, then use your seichel to figure out what won't damage the yichud, as much as always keeping in mind that harchakas are a very necessary thing. Chazal are smart. And they were telling you, this won't last. Do this, boom, boom, boom. It's a train wreck. Okay, so make yourselves harchakos. Make yourself things that you will not break, right? But the actual nitty-gritty of exactly Chazal said it, they were saying it as the smartest way. But if it doesn't work, then do something which is less smart, but effective. Okay, but you understand the reason why I'm saying that all that away is I want you to understand what I'm saying as opposed to what it says in Shulchan Aruch. You can blame me, or you can blame Rav Ovadia. You can't blame Shulchan Aruch on that one. Okay. It's also clear in Shulchan Aruch that if a person is sick, even in Bo Sakana, but he's weak, right? And therefore he can't do certain things himself, then you're allowed to do all kinds of stuff as long as there's no skin touch. Right? Skin touch is a closer, is more of a situation of possibility. So they said different type of harchakas for sickness. So for example, you can pick him up, you can move him around, and as long as you're touching his clothes. And this is what I say, that in the middle of labor, the process of labor, before you get to the end where it's serious business, right? As long as you don't see the woman freaking out, Right? If the woman's freaking out, then she's going to freak out the end too. But it's just like, help me, can you help me this and that? So then there's no problem doing all kinds of things. Just don't touch. So for example, she wants you to hold her hands, but she's okay. She just wants you to hold her hand. So put on a glove, and that's totally fine. Right? In transition, I wouldn't say that. Transition, don't have a glove because she needs you. And that's kallah sheyesh bo sakana. But a kallah she'ein bo sakana, which is before that. So any woman is going through labor is a kallah she'ein bo sakana, and that's also true, by the way, for 30 days after she has a baby. Right, 30 days after she has a baby, she's in the hospital and she needs to get up out of her bed and she needs to have the bed air. Don't play games. No, don't touch her skin. But make sure that she's comfortable. She needs help. Now it does say in the poskim that it's important to find someone else to do that for her. Right? And if there's someone else who can do a good job, then you have that person do it first. And I would definitely say that there's an emotional aspect over here, that yes, you can find someone else to do it after labor, but it won't have the same impact. Because it's not only the fact that she needs to get out of her bed, in her bed, she also needs to have the emotional support. Okay? So a woman who's not postpartum, I would say, do all the physical things that she needs, and as long as you can tell she needs it, not somebody else. But in the case of postpartum, I would even suggest the couple to lay together physically, and the man to keep in mind that he's making her healthy and not go to places which is not necessary, because when a guy knows what he's doing, he stays in good places. But even in that situation, I would definitely do physical touch. Anybody not understand what I just said?
Okay, great.
Okay, great.
Can I just ask if there's a source for this 30 days postpartum?
Yeah. What did you ask me?
If there's a source for the sakana extending to 30 days postpartum.
Yeah, of course. Yes, it has. The places it's quoted in halacha is that a woman for 7 days after she has a baby, she needs food, hot food. She needs hot, fresh food, to the point of which on Shabbos we shech the cow. And in Yom Kippur she eats. And she eats to make herself feel good. That's for 7 days. After the 7 days, she's called a kallah she'ein bo sakana. What's the ramifications of that? That if she needs something to be cooked, or if she needs something to be whatever it is she needs, you ask a guy to do it. Normally you can't ask a guy to do malacha, but a woman after birth for 30 days, she needs to be taken care of to the point of which we mater chilul Shabbos out with a guy. Okay? That a clear, Makar?
Yeah, thank you.
It's
also relevant for Tisha B'Av, that a woman for 30 days after labor should not fast on Tisha B'Av. Because a chola on Tisha B'Av is pater, because Chazal don't make. This is a very important concept to understand, that a chola she'ein bo sakana, in the eyes of Chazal, was a word that she could be misukanet. We look long term. And therefore, even though right now she looks totally fine, only has the flu, but we say if you don't take care of her, you don't take care of him, whatever it is, it could be bad. So we bend the rules as much as possible, even the Rabbanans, in order to make sure that this person stays healthy. So on Tisha B'Av, for example, where Chazal is making up it's a Rabbanan nowadays on Tisha B'Av. So the Rabbanan don't make people fast, because if they fast, this person may get into a situation of sakana. So the standard halacha, what's passed in Shulchan Aruch, is that a woman after 30 days does not fast on Tisha B'Av, and a man who is sick does not fast on Tisha B'Av. Okay. Any questions so far?
Yeah, just clarifying, Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur is different?
Yes, because Yom Kippur is a halacha from the Torah, from Hashem. And he's saying this day, in order for you to get to the madrega that you need in order to have your body become tahar, and the chet all the chatoim to be washed away, you need to transcend into a different reality where the body is less in charge and the soul is more in charge, and therefore you need those 5 things: not eating, not sleeping, not being together with your husband, not washing, and not putting things on your not ointments on your body, in order to transcend to that state. The only thing that we allow in Yom Kippur is a situation of sakana, where she's going to, not going to live. So there's no purpose in doing transcending if you're not going to survive. There's absolutely no point in that. So therefore, she eats on the 7 days after labor, because otherwise she's in sakana. However, Tisha B'Av is a nevuah that came from Yeshayahu. Pretty sure Yirmiyahu, that for the four situations of Churban Abayis, we need to be in a situation of tainus, which is about kapara and doing tshuva, and since the situation is that we're not in a situation of shmad, it's just a minhag of Klal Yisrael to continue it, which makes it totally a d'Rabbanan. And when Chazal made minhagim, or they made halachas, they had certain dispensations not to do destructive things. So, for example, Tisha B'Av, where it's a chole, so it's very nice to misabel on the Churban Bayis, but it's not a good idea to cause people to be closer to sakana. So there's no purpose in doing that on Tisha B'Av, because we made it up, so we're not going to make it up in that situation. Similarly, in the other fasts, where it's also a minhag, so that Klal Yisrael were not noheg to do that minhag on people who are pregnant, a woman who are pregnant, or women who are nursing. Ashkenazim are a little more crazy, and they decided to do that anyway. But in the Ikar Hadin of the Gemara, the other 3 tzomos are not relevant to a woman who is nursing or pregnant, because they only made a minig in the situation where a person is totally healthy. A person who is weakened by her body being used by another person, she shouldn't be fasting on those days. That clear?
Okay. I get
that means it's clear, right?
Okay, good.
So I'm going to use the next 3 minutes. One more thing which will make it another clarity is the same way that dam that is not in the time of the menstrual cycle does not make a woman tamei min Torah. One of the examples of that is also called dam besulim. Obviously, dam besulim is literally a cut. Right? And therefore, it does not. There's absolutely no reason that she should become tamei. Ad kedei kach, that until the time of the early Amoraim, right, which is in the time of the Gemara, she wasn't tamei. It's a gezerah that started at that point, and the Rishonim have a very difficult time trying to understand exactly why they did that. And when we learn dam besulim, we'll discuss it. Another example of dam not becoming tamei is that if the dam doesn't come from the inside of the rechem, it comes from the base harechem, right, the sides. That's literally a cut and makes absolutely no tumah, because it's not part of the menstrual cycle. And not only that, if we can figure out where it came from, which is a whole complicated thing, it's no longer confused with dam nida, because we know that it came from a different source. It's like a nosebleed, and therefore it's not only not a problem of Torah, it's not even a kesem. Okay, so we'll get to that, how we can apply that halacha. It's not as simple as it is to apply, because we don't always know where the dam came from. In fact, we never know where the dam came from. But just to get the concept down, the only type of dam is either only type of dam which is metame comes out of the rechem. If it doesn't come out of the rechem, like dam besulim or dam on the sides, is absolutely no tuma, and dam besulim needs to be explained. And even dam that comes out needs to have a hargasha. And when it comes out not a hargasha, minato is totally fine. What we have a problem with this in this generation is that when you come to Rav and you ask him a question, he doesn't always have the knowledge to say, oh yes, this didn't come with a hargasha, because maybe it did, and she just didn't know. And that makes things quite complicated and quite difficult, and we'll get to that, to apply that halacha. But before we get to that difficulty, the next time, I don't remember when I'm teaching next, the next time we're going to discuss what are the dispensations that Chazal made to make dam that is not dam nida mutter.
Okay?
Okay?
Okay,
so until we meet again, everyone should have a wonderful day.
Mayan
Mayan
Mazal
Mazal Tov.
Lots of
Lots of
nachas.
nachas.
Okay.
So sweet.
Yeah. That
You're
blew my
so cute. Mazal tov. He looks like you.
Oh yeah.